For the past decades, we've seen the steady growth of the average salary in the US. We see news of new income hikes almost every month, and politicians can't stop bragging about workers' improved earnings and future plans.
Wage growth for workers remains solid, down from the historic high pace months ago, but still growing for workers who deserve a raise. And this is the progress we need to see.
It seems like people are really earning more, but is it true? It turns out that, surprise, inflation is too high and people are earning much less than they did before. It turns out, despite wage gains, people are getting poorer, and the dollar you have in your pocket is a completely different thing to what people had 50 years ago. It's still green and crunchy, but its value has fallen down dramatically. How did that happen and why? In this video, I'll give you the answer. How come that the world's largest economy is struggling so much with improving people's earnings? Where are grandparents in their time richer than we are today? To understand what's happening right now, we must look at the big picture. Let's look at this graph of inflation in America for the last 100 years. Here, we can see how the inflation was plummeting right before the Great Depression. In the 1920s, the US economy was going through a deflation. People were not buying things, so the production in America almost died. The value of the dollar was rising right until it caused the Great Depression. Then, after the economy started to recover, the Second World War happened. Huge military expenses caused another inflation hike. Next, the war in Vietnam, followed by the Great Inflation from 1965 to 1980, when the inflation reached its peak of 13.5%. Those difficult times were followed by decades of economic recovery and growth, the 2008 crisis. That was by far one of the biggest economic hits of the 21st century. And then COVID. The inflation soared from 1.23% to 4.7% in 2021 and 8.2% as of October 2022. Okay, we figured out the inflation, but what about the salaries? How much did people earn throughout this century? In 1925, the statistics of income released by the Treasury Department showed that the average salary in 1922 was equal to a little over $3,000. In today's money, it will be around $55,000. According to the FRED, in 2022, the median income in America is almost $71,000. So over a century, people's salaries have grown by 27%. But is that really an improvement? The dollar itself is much stronger, right? We can buy more things with it, right? Well, wrong. If you look at this graph, you will see that over the years, the buying power of the dollar was gradually decreasing. And this graph shows how much the prices for goods and usual expenses have increased. We see that over the last century, people are paying almost 5,000% more for their groceries than they did a century ago. 6,000% more for housing, almost 3,000% more for transportation, and 9,500% more for healthcare. These numbers are really scary. But how does that really look for average people? How much more do we really pay? The best place to start would be the cost of food and usual expenses. Government actually calculates such expenses of its citizens, calling it CPI, and publishes. CPI, or Consumer Price Index, is a common measure of inflation which measures the price change for a basket of goods and services. The so-called basket is representing people's spending habits and patterns, as well as changes in these patterns. The Bureau of Labor and Statistics tracks 94,000 prices monthly for over 200 categories of products and services. Broad categories like food, energy, clothing, and services include dozens of small subcategories for everything from bananas to haircuts. So the graph of the Consumer Price Index for 1922 to 2022 will look like this. In 1922, a basket of goods did cost $16.80. The price has been rising until the Great Depression and then fell down, just like the inflation. Throughout the 30th, it was lower than in 20th, but in 1947, 2 years after the war, it reached $22.5. 1975, $53.8, 3 times more than in 1922. In 1990, it peaked at $130, growing by 141% in 15 years. In 2006, this same exact basket did cost $200, and now in 2022, $294. That's 20 times more than a century ago. But let's take a closer look at the basket itself and analyze where and how much more we pay. Luckily, the Bureau of Labor and Statistics has that info. Sadly, the earliest available data is from 2002. The price of beef has increased by 130 36% in the last 20 years, from $2 to almost $5. Chicken, however, only gained 76%. Bread is around 75% more expensive. A gallon of milk costs 53% more than it did in 2002. Fruits and vegetables are also 50 to 55% more expensive. Luckily, bananas cost almost the same as they did 20 years ago, so that's a win. Eggs, on the other hand, almost tripled in price, going from $1.04 for a dozen to $2.90 in October 2022. The cost of electricity has almost doubled, going from 90 cents per kilowatt to $1.70. And gasoline has almost tripled in price, going from $1.4 a gallon to $3.88, reaching over $5 in June of 2022. As you see, all prices go up and the same salary can give you less and less. But bloated costs of food and services are only the tip of the iceberg. The real fun begins in the housing market. In 1985, the cost of average house was around $83,000, which worked rather well with the average salary of about $56,000, but then the prices of homes and people's salaries started growing at completely different paces. In 2000, the same house did cost $165,000, while salaries stayed roughly the same at $66,000 a year. It took only 15 years to increase people's debt repayment period 3 times. And now, after a crisis and COVID in 2022, the average house costs $455,000 and the salary equals a little over $70K a year. Now, people need to spend 6 years worth of salaries to buy an average house, and that's without accounting or the living expenses. In fact, if home prices grew at the same rate as inflation since 1970, the median home price today would be just $177,000 rather than $400,000. It's now also much more expensive to take mortgages, and people are forced to select options with more deposit weeks than they did before. Here's the graph that shows how long now it takes to buy an average house. As you see, in 2008, people were paying a lot of money every fortnight to repay their debts thanks to extremely high interest rates of that time. The crisis that followed has changed the game, and for half a decade, buying homes was easy once again. Then, in 2013 to 2014, the LVR restrictions caused a massive spike in duration of mortgages, despite no changes to the monthly payments. And now, in 2022, we see that people are paying huge amounts of money every fortnight and will continue to do so for many years to come. So let's face it, the dollar is not as strong as it once used to be, and there are 5 major reasons for that. First, monetary policy of Fed. If Fed, for example, lowers interest rates, people start borrowing more, thus businesses can grow and return those borrowed money into the economy. If the interest rates are rising, people borrow less, start saving more, and the economy loses money. No demand for dollars, lower prices. The second contributing factor is inflation. Currently, it is at a 40-year high, and it will continue growing as the Fed continues to increase interest rates. Goods and services start to cost more, and the demand decreases. If this trend continues, we may be at risk of deflation and another depression. The third factor is the abundance of cheap cash after the pandemics. The government has printed billions of dollars to stimulate businesses and people after the COVID. Trillions of new banknotes doesn't mean the demand for the currency will rise. It means there are simply more dollars now, which naturally decreases its value. The fourth reason is an abundance of failing mortgages. Housing mortgages, car mortgages, business loans. People are now unable to pay for them in time. If they get repossessed, there will be no one to buy them because the loans are too expensive. So the market is filled with properties and cars that are losing value, and people see that. They wait for the value to drop again. And that's the road towards deflation, just like Japan had in 90th. And the fifth reason, America is entangled in international geopolitical conflicts, which inflicts damage on import and export. The current situation isn't optimal in any way. Dollar isn't feeling so well. It has lost almost all its value since 1920, but still manages to power through. People aren't earning a lot to pay for the living, gaining less than 30% in salary in a century, while paying 20 times more for food and services. People pay more for houses, mortgages take longer to repay. If the tendency we see now will persist, the future of the US dollar can be fuzzy. We are for sure nearing another recession, so let's hope it won't be as bad as the Great Depression. What do you think about the state of the US dollar? Can it become stronger in the future? Let me know your thoughts thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this video or learned something new. Also, subscribe to this channel to never miss our new videos. Thank you for watching and see you soon.